Dear students, welcome to the course Enhancement of Active Citizenship and Democratic Values, where we explore the key concepts of active citizenship and democratic values. We explore the definitions and implications in educational, social, and cultural contexts. I am Atul Nag, Associate Professor of Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, and I will be exploring the concept of freedom of expression. I have divided my lesson into four parts. The first part, we will explore the origins of freedom of expression. Then we'll look at the freedom of expression in the European Union, followed by looking at the freedom of expression in India, and then the freedom of expression and media in Nepal. The freedom of expression origins. The freedom of expression entails the privilege to express one's opinions and ideas without apprehension of censorship or punishment. It is a vital human right that is fundamental for a democratic society. The concept of freedom of expression emerged in ancient Greece. In Athens, citizens could voice their views in the assembly, debating and voting on laws. Other ancient civilizations, such as Rome and China, later adopted this free speech doctrine. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church limited the freedom of expression. The Church controlled what people could read and write, punishing those who confronted its authority. However, some thinkers, such as John Wycliffe and Martin Luther, challenged the Church's monopoly on knowledge. The 17th century saw a flowering of freedom of expression in Europe. The 1689 English Bill of Rights guaranteed freedom of speech in Parliament, and the philosopher John Milton argued that freedom of speech was essential for the pursuit of truth. The American Revolution was also a watershed moment for freedom of expression. The Declaration of Independence affirmed the right of all people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which included the freedom to voice their opinions freely. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution enshrined this right in law. In the 19th century, these ideas spread to other regions such as France and India. 1948 saw the United Nations adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which identified the freedom of speech and expression as an essential human right, along with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, in 1966. We'll now look at the freedom of expression in the European context. The European Convention in Article 10 guarantees the freedom of speech and expression, including a privilege to access and discuss ideas and an obligation to do so responsibly. This combination of privileges and responsibilities make it unique among human rights as it contains both rights and duties that come with it. If you look at the Article 10, it has two parts. The first part reads, everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. This article shall not prevent states from requiring the licensing of broadcasting, television, or cinema enterprises. And the second part reads, the exercises of these freedoms, since it carries with it duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interests of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, for the protection of the reputation or rights of others, for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, or for maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. Why is free expression essential? Freedom to receive and communicate information and ideas without state interference is critical for the functioning of a modern democratic society. The Article 10, as we just saw, provides a high level of protection to the unrestrained expression of political ideas and opinions. Democracies are a free marketplace of ideas, where the free and unhindered competition of different political ideas lead to the best perspective or solutions for societal problems. Any curtailment of the liberty of expression limits the free competition of ideas and hinders the operation of a free and democratic society. Protection for unpopular ideas. Freedom of speech and expression is highly valued even when the information or ideas are offensive or disliked by some. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, is a powerful sentiment expressed by the French philosopher Voltaire. It underscores the importance of free speech and the value of defending diverse perspectives even when we disagree. In a society where opinions vary widely, this quote serves as a reminder that respectful dialogue and exchanging ideas are essential for progress and understanding. Protection for media and elected representatives. This privilege applies to everyone, but elected representatives and journalists have a special status due to their role in political debate. Elected representatives and journalists are spokespersons for their electorate and for spreading political information and opinion, respectively, and thus deserve to be specially protected. What are the limits to free expression? Freedom of expression and speech is a fundamental right in democracies, but it does come with specific duties and responsibilities. These restrictions are only legitimate if prescribed by law and necessary to protect critical societal interests. Extreme form of hate speech and incitement to violence are not protected as they can lead to intolerance and discrimination. Protection against discrimination. The case concerning four Swedish youngsters who had put discriminatory leaflets in the school locker of a high school warning against homosexual people. A local court convicted the four boys for hate speech. And when they appealed at the higher court, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg illustrated that discrimination based on sexual orientation or any other forms of discrimination is unacceptable and justifies limitations on the freedom of expression. This case shows that open societies must balance total freedom and complete censorship to protect people from violence and discrimination. The European Convention helps to find this balance by allowing states to take measures against expressions that promote racial discrimination. Now we come to exploring the freedom of expression in India. The Constitution of India guarantees fundamental freedoms to its citizens, including the right to freedom. The right guarantees citizens the privilege to lead a life with dignity and be free from external restrictions. Freedom is crucial for increasing productivity, fostering imagination and thought, and improving the standard of living. Its presence also plays a vital part in the individual's political and social life. If you look at the right to freedom, which is outlined in the Articles 19, 20, 21A, and 22, it guarantees citizens six freedoms: expression and speech, peaceful assembly, forming associations or unions, mobility, residence and settlement, practice of any profession. If you look at the historical context of freedom of expression, in India during colonial times, the British heavily restrained the freedom of expression. The British implemented laws such as the Sedition Act of 1870 to suppress nationalist feelings. If you look at the constitutional protections, especially Article 19(1)(a) in the Constitution, outlines the fundamental rights of Indian citizens, including the freedom of expression and speech. This privilege enables individuals to propagate their views without fear of repercussions openly and is essential to democracy, including publishing other people's views and propagating one's opinions. If you look at the legal limitations, the Indian Constitution's Article 19(2) mentions conditions for imposing reasonable restrictions by the state. Reasonable, reasonable restrictions based on 8 grounds are defamation, contempt of court, decency or morality, state security, cordial relations with other states, sedition, incitement to an offense, public order. Furthermore, during a national emergency, the President of India can revoke privileges and authorize suspending citizens' right to approach the Supreme Court to implement their freedom. So, we'll now look at some notable cases of how the Supreme Court has protected the freedom of expression. The Supreme Court in India has always defended press freedom as a fundamental right under the Article 19(1)(a) and a key pillar of democracy. The court upheld this fundamental right in judgments such as Romesh Thapar versus the State of Madras, Indian Express Newspapers versus the Union of India, Bennett Coleman and Co. versus the Union of India, and Prabhu Dutt versus the Union of India. These were some notable judgments. In terms of broadcasting and advertisement, the court has recognized the liberty to broadcast and advertise under the freedom of expression and speech. In a claim involving a serial shown on the state channel, the court opined that this was part of the fundamental liberty provided by Article 19(1)(a), rejecting the claim as the plaintiff failed to show evidence of detriment to the public. We now look at the right to information. This right is a constitutional guarantee affirmed by the Supreme Court. Citizens are entitled to know about the affairs of the ruling body they elect per the Article 19. Right to information ensures that the democracy is not weakened by one sided information or misinformation. Right to criticize. The Supreme Court also affirmed the freedom to criticize without causing defamation in the case Rangarajan versus Jagjivan Ram. Also, in Menka Gandhi versus Union of India, the court mentioned the privilege of expression without geographical boundaries. Also, in the case Vijay Emmanuel versus State of Kerala, confirmed the right of those dismissed for not singing the national anthem to refuse to speak or remain silent. Now we will explore the freedom of expression and media in Nepal. The freedom of expression in media are essential for the democracy and human rights. If you look at the overview of the media industry in Nepal, Nepal's media industry has experienced rapid growth with more than 800 registered print and electronic media outlets. It is a diverse industry with government owned and private media organizations. It has advanced democracy and human rights, but the media also confronts censorship, closures, and threat to journalists. If you look at the historical background, Media freedom and freedom of expression has a problematic past in Nepal. During the monarchy era, the media was heavily censored and controlled by the state, resulting in journalists facing censorship, imprisonment, and torture. Some improvements resulted from the introduction of multi-party democracy in 1990s, but civil war resulted in a clampdown on the media. With the adoption of a new constitution in 2015, at the end of the civil war, the situation progressed with the provision of rights such as press freedom, freedom of expression, and the right to information. Despite this, violations still occur, particularly regarding sensitive topics. If you look at the current state of media freedom and expression, freedom of media, speech, and expression in Nepal are a mixed bag. There is a notable growth in the radio and television stations online and print media outlets, creating a more diverse and pluralistic media environment. The government can use restrictive laws and regulations such as the Electronic Transaction Act and the Criminal Code to suppress critical voices. Media organizations and journalists must comply with government licensing requirements and censorship, which can restrict the freedom of expression. What are the challenges they face in Nepal? Media organizations and journalists in Nepal have faced various difficulties that have restricted their ability to report freely and independently, including censorship, intimidation, and violence. The Committee to Protect Journalists (CPG) has mentioned that Nepal is one of the most dangerous countries for journalists in South Asia, as several journalists were murdered in recent years in connection with their work. Censorship and self censorship are two significant forms of media restrictions in Nepal, often coming from the government, political parties, and influential individuals. Self censorship can lead to an absence of diverse perspectives in media, which is essential for a democratic society. What is media's role in promoting democracy and human rights in Nepal? Media in Nepal plays an important role in promoting democracy and human rights by providing a platform for diverse voices and perspectives, holding those in power accountable and raising cognition about human rights issues. The Nepal government has a mixed record on freedom of media, speech, and expression, with some efforts to promote it and some instances of censorship, self censorship, and other forms of restrictions on speech. Despite these hindrances, media bodies and journalists in Nepal continue to fight for their rights and push for greater freedom and expression. What is the government stance? The government of Nepal has committed to promoting freedom of media, speech, and expression, but its stance remains challenging. It has faced criticism for censorship, media closures, and threat to journalists, and its stance must may need to be more consistent and clear. Let us look at some examples of censorship and violations. The media faces numerous challenges in Nepal, including censorship, harassment, and violence. A radio journalist in 2019 was murdered while covering a protest, sparking widespread outrage. There is a need for a clear regulatory framework, inadequate legal protection, and political intimidation, and some matters that media institutions and journalists have to confront. Despite these difficulties, media is essential for promoting democracy and human rights. Experts and stakeholders have different opinions on media freedom, speech, and expression status in Nepal, and some believe there is still a long way to go. Free and independent media can positively impact Nepali society and democracy, while censorship and repression can have serious negative consequences. At the end, let us look at the summary of the lesson. Freedom of expression and speech is an essential human right in democracies. Yet governments are increasingly curtailing this right through unjustifiable measures such as targeting journalists, protesters, and dissidents. Laws are used to limit democratic opposition movements, and metadata retention schemes impede press freedom and free speech. Civil societies must proactively uphold freedom of expression and speech to preserve healthy democracies and improve people's lives. Censorship, harassment, and violence hinder the freedom of media, speech, and expression. Notwithstanding this, the media is critical for democracy and human rights. The government, media organizations, and other stakeholders must work together to create a strong and vibrant media sector to ensure that the media can operate freely and independently. Thank you. And this was part of the Aurora project, which is the Alliance of Universities to reinforce teacher training curricula to outcast radicalism and promote equality in Asian societies. Thank you.